Step back with me for a moment to December 15th, 2001. I was with a group of activists on the west steps of the Capitol, down in Denver, where interesting things often happen. And we were surrounding a man who was running for office. He was running for United States Senate with the Libertarian Party of Colorado. And he was there at the Capitol for one specific and peculiar reason, which was to willfully break one of the local laws. Specifically, he was going to break the law against holding a gun, carrying a gun openly on your side in Denver. So I was just a few feet away from him as he strapped a sidearm, a gun to his hip. He was immediately swarmed by Denver police officers who promptly arrested him and escorted him off to the waiting patrol vehicle. Meanwhile, I was loudly protesting his arrest. So at that moment, I was proud to be a libertarian. Unfortunately, over the course of the next year, this same candidate for office also forwarded a racist email to his followers. He suggested that then Senator Wayne Allard should be tried for treason, and then if convicted, hanged by the neck until dead. These positions I could not get on board with. And there were some other problems with other candidates, not that extreme, but still problems. And so I had to wonder, were these problems I was seeing symptomatic of deeper problems, or were they just isolated cases? And this was important to me. Now I want to emphasize that I was deeply entrenched in the Libertarian Party movement at that time. I was even on the state board for a while, and for nearly 2 years I produced the Libertarian Party's newsletter for the state. Here's a cover I printed out of one of those newsletters. I think it's as good as it's ever been when I did it. I also was assistant editor on the book The New Prohibition, edited by Sheriff Bill Masters, then a Libertarian. I think he's a Democrat now. But this includes essays by people like Ron Paul, who ran for president as a Libertarian. It includes an essay by Jeffrey Myron, somebody I respect. He runs Libertarianism A to Z. In addition, I met a man that many call Mr. Libertarian, Murray Rothbard. I'll read you quickly what he wrote in my copy of his book, Man, Economy, and State. July 1994, to Ari, for man and economy and against the state. Best wishes, Murray Rothbard. So it's not like I'm just criticizing libertarianism as an outsider. I was deeply involved in the movement. And I came to believe that the problems I was witnessing were indeed symptomatic of deeper problems. Now I want to say here that I don't think that the problems I describe apply to every single libertarian. There are many different kinds of libertarians. I respect many libertarians. So what I'm describing are broad tendencies. My general motto here is, love the libertarian, hate the libertarianism. But nevertheless, I do see some larger problems with the libertarian movement. The first and most important problem is that libertarianism tends toward moral subjectivism. Now, libertarians often argue that they start with an axiom of the non-initiation of force. Or they'll also say that it's an axiom that the individual owns himself or herself. But if you begin to dig into these ideas, you will so quickly discover that these cannot function as axioms. They don't even make sense as axioms without a much richer philosophical moral foundation. So you get some oddities, like libertarians will often say, they'll try to persuade everybody of any possible ideological persuasion that they should be libertarian. You're a hard left environmentalist who thinks the earth has intrinsic value and should be protected with the same as humans? Well, you should be a libertarian because you can use the free market to advance your green agenda. Or they'll tell a pot-smoking hippie on the left, well, you should be a libertarian because we want to legalize drugs and you can smoke pot in the park all day long. Or they'll tell somebody on the hard right, religious right, who wants to totally abolish abortion. They would say, well, you probably won't be successful with the law, so instead, just use voluntary persuasion. Be a libertarian and you can persuade people not to get an abortion. Needless to say, these sorts of arguments are rarely effective with their intended targets. There's a closely related problem, which is that libertarians tend to be anti-government, anti-state, against the state. And I think that's because they lack the moral foundation. So therefore, they're not strongly for anything. They're not for building up this system to protect individual rights. They're more against government, against the state. So you have many libertarians who are avowed anarchists. They simply want to do away with all government. There are other examples, like if Ron Paul's comments on 9/11, if you put those up alongside the comments of disgraced former Professor Ward Churchill from Boulder, those comments are nearly indistinguishable. Some prominent libertarians have gone so far as to say that we should repeal the laws against adults having sex with children. That's outright insanity. Clearly we need government to step in here and protect the rights of children. And yet some libertarians say, well, that's government, so it must be bad. Or many libertarians want to repeal all patents and copyrights. They want to do away with intellectual property because government runs that, right? So it must be bad. We're going to do away with that, tear that down. So libertarianism is fundamentally a reactionary movement in the sense that they're against something, the government, the state, not for individual rights and a system required to protect them. So it was with reluctance that I came to agree with the conclusion, finally, that something that Peter Schwartz wrote. He wrote, you know, libertarianism is actually the perversion of liberty. And I fought this for many, many months, and it took me a long span of time to come to this conclusion on my own. But finally I came to agree with that. And that, in short, is why I'm not a libertarian. Thank you.